like sort of how going back to past seasons, guys like Hunter Shinkaruk and guys like that, floaters like that, were typically got lesser ice time and eventually were just healthy scratches altogether. And I feel like hopefully that Laval will be trying to push a similar mindset with their new head coaches. Definitely Buckberger brings a veteranocity and sort of an experience to Laval, which will be very helpful. He's played for some really bad teams in his career. He was the first ever captain of the Atlanta Thrashers in their initial season. So I
Woohoo!
think yeah, shout out Atlanta. I think Buckberger kind of knows how to deal with lesser rosters like that, and especially with Laval having a roster with a lot of AHL contracted guys. A lot of these guys on the team are coming here with something to prove. They want to get an NHL deal, or they want to get more pay somewhere else, or they're looking overseas. So I definitely feel like this will be a hungry team, and I'm definitely hopeful that this coaching staff can match what Bouchard brought in terms of just rewarding hard work and just allowing guys opportunities.
Sebastian, give me your take on the new coaches, and while you're in that same breath, once you're done, let's talk about this new roster because there's definitely a lot of guys who have a lot to prove as well.
Yeah, for sure. Like Scott's the AHL expert among the two of us, but I mean, Uhl is a really interesting.
Yeah, but you guys are the prospect heroes. That's a duo. That's plural. So
okay. I'm more of a junior guy, but hey, like Uhl, I think is a really interesting one because he was an assistant coach in the AHL for like 5 or 6 seasons. Like he's really been like a staple behind an AHL bench for a long time. So he has that experience, and like losing Bouchard is it hurts from a results standpoint. From a team like not philosophy, but like chemistry and just how the team itself works,
whatnot.
So, I don't know what the impact of that is because Bouchard has had a lot of mixed reviews, to put it lightly. Like players like Jake Evans loved him, and if you know Jake Evans, he's like the hardest working guy you're ever gonna see ever in the NHL. But like Dale Weiss has been very prominent in his flaming of Bouchard, which again you can definitely take with grains of salt because this is an established NHL player that probably isn't very happy playing in the AHL.
Or is working very hard at the AHL, might I add.
Or that, right? You don't know. And like Weiss came out and publicly said that like Bouchard was like extremely tough on guys like Ryan Poehling, and that was also part of the reason that Poehling just struggled so much in his first year in Laval. And yeah, so I don't know how it's going to be from a like team chemistry standpoint, but I think from a results standpoint, it'll be very difficult for any coaching staff to get more out of their players than what Bouchard was doing. At the same time, just transitioning this into the Laval lineup.
Yeah, go for it.
I think the lineup's just objectively better than it was last season, and this despite losing like some very key players like Yannick Veilleux, who like went from a fourth liner in the AHL and ECHL player to being a like borderline dominant force in the AHL, and he's now off to Europe. And despite losing a key player like that, like Laval and has just really like bolstered their lineup. Like they've added guys like Gabriel Bourque on an AHL contract. They've added Jean-Sébastien D. They still have Belzile, Vedemo, Dauphin, Teasdale, Poehling, Harvey Pinard.
Which is funny because you're mentioning Bourque, you're mentioning Poehling, you're mentioning Dauphin, you're even Jean-Sébastien D. These are guys who could play on a fourth line on most teams.
Exactly. Like it's going to be a really stacked AHL team. And that there's just like the forward core. On defense, they added Louis Belpedio, who has NHL pedigree. It's really interesting. Like I'm like one player I'm really interested to see if he even gets a role in the AHL. Like I'm going to assume he's going to play most of the season in Trois-Rivières, but that's Cédric Desruisseaux. He's a fun one. He's a really fun.
I will agree with you on that, Sebastian. Desruisseaux is a player who, when he was picked up, I didn't know a whole lot about. Then I saw his numbers, and then I saw the story behind him and sort of everything that's come with. And yeah, he's a very, very interesting prospect. I think a really good point to mention with Laval is that they have a lot of AHL contracted guys, and Well, most people probably aren't aware of this. The Rocket have had experience with AHL contracted guys for all of their first 3 seasons, from their first season under Sylvain Lefebvre to their second season of Joe Bouchard to the season before that to this season, etc. The thing about the Rocket that they struggled with early on was that Montreal in 2018-19 and 2019-20 dealt with mid-season collapses that caused them to call up guys from Laval or trade guys from Laval and just sort of swap around the roster, which naturally completely depleted Laval's roster. So for a little anecdote here, I went to a Laval Rocket game in 2017-18 and 2018-19, and the player on the front of the Laval Rocket media guide was Alex Kyle, who is currently in the ECHL. And
yeah, I think the silence actually just like.
Yeah, that's a point into just talking about how the Rocket used to be.
Yeah.
But in signing guys like Danik Martel and signing guys like Gabriel Bork, these aren't just guys who played really well in the ECHL and are given AHL opportunities with guys like Joe Cox. These are players that have proven pedigrees at the AHL level and also are just going to be really solid contributors right off the bat. In my own opinion, and had it not been for Xavier Ouellet returning, I think Gabriel Bork could have been the Laval Rockets captain right off the bat. Bork was a very, very talented player for the Nashville Predators, the Colorado Avalanche, and the Winnipeg Jets at the NHL level. And while his offense never really showcased, he's a dynamic two-way player at the AHL level.
He's a hard worker, man. Like
for sure, absolutely. And also going back to what I said about Martel, he's a two-time 40-point player in the AHL who's now playing on a second consecutive AHL deal. So I feel like if Laval runs with these kind of guys in their roster, it'll definitely set an interesting precedent for an AHL team that just hasn't been seen in a while.
What do you guys think the actual plan, if there is a plan, behind these signatures are? Is it just say, okay, you know what, we need to stack this team, let's give it a good little run, like put on a good show for example, right? Or because I'm looking at guys like Bourque, I'm looking at guys, again, Dauphin, Paling, even Harvey Pinard to a certain degree, or anybody else who can make a surprise. Even though the Canadians are stacked on the bottom six, and we're going to be talking about this later on in the show. We're going to be talking about the Montreal fourth line and the huge logjam. I'm of the opinion that I think that Bergevin had a plan behind this, being like, you know what? I got a bunch of players who are hungry, and they're going to be chasing the NHL dream like a dog on a bone, and they're going to be working, their hinds off, and they're going to be, you know what? Like, I got a chance of going up there because I want to be the first one to be called up if there's an injury, or I want to prove it during training camp or whatever. Do you think maybe that's the overall goal when they were hiring these players?
I think it goes two ways in regard to that, because one of the important things to mention regarding a lot of the guys in Montreal sign is that they're also looking to get a great story out of it, because there's been the argument made many times that the Canadians don't have enough Quebec-born players on this team. They don't have enough local players. Philippe Deneau was their only player last season who was truly from this area. And I feel like in signing all these guys who are from around this area, guys who went to the University of Trois-Rivières, guys who are from Trois-Rivières, guys who are from Montreal and Laval, they're trying to produce these local-born players to root for on the Canadians' minor league rosters, because they don't want to risk signing a guy to the Canadians roster who, while he's a great story and while he's a homegrown player, sort of can bog down the overall roster. Now, going back to what you said about the Canadians signing these guys to be hungry and fight for a roster spot, there are a few guys in the Laval Rocket roster who I think could do that. One guy that I've talked about previously is Jacques D, and I feel like while he sort of has been given the short end of the stick in terms of his NHL opportunities, this is a guy who published on his Instagram that he's super excited to come here. He's been a Canadian since he was young, and he's sort of a Joseph Blandisi type, if you want to think about a guy who played for Laval last season, where he's bounced around the NHL rosters, and he's always a guy who has a chance to make the NHL. Any season, he always has a chance to make an NHL roster. Whether he will or not remains to be seen, but I definitely feel like out of all the guys in the Montreal side, I think D is at the front runner to become a potential part of the Canadiens roster.
Yeah, and just as a follow-up to that, my player for that slot is actually a really maybe under the radar guy, someone most people might not look to immediately as a candidate to play any NHL games this season, and that would be Corey Schooneman. He was really great last season in Laval, like really, really, really great. He's a phenomenal skater. And he has a bit of dynamic offensive ability that very few players in Montreal have.
I totally agree with that.
Because he would bring a very different look to a Montreal defensive core. So if Montreal is going through a rut and they just need to shake some things up and they want to bring in a defenseman who can dominate in transition, and also play a bit on the power play, I think Schoenemann would be a very interesting one. And he was so good, like last season, like he barely even like made the Laval roster at a training camp, and then he cemented himself as a top pairing guy and earned himself an NHL contract. So he's one I'd look at.
The Montreal's had experience with these guys before, with Joel Hanley and Ryan Johnson. So they're no stranger to giving these sort of smaller, faster guys chances.
Yeah.
All right. So to wrap this segment up, guys, just real quick, I'm seeing Elias jump in his chair. I'm seeing Josh, who's been holding it, and he's like, "Oh man, I want to say something. Elias, you look like a guy who wants to talk about Schenman. Go ahead.
Yeah, actually, I just want to make a quick 2-second comment. I was actually watching. You remember that game when Carey Price and Brendan Gallagher did that AHL conditioning stint at the Bell Center?
Of course.
Yeah.
Who doesn't remember that? I think it was the highest TV-rated AHL game in history.
So basically, I actually watched the game from start to finish, and that literally was the player that literally stuck out to me, like all over the ice. This guy was probably the best player on both teams, like on the ice. He's really skilled, and I really see him as someone for Montreal's future.
Absolutely, Josh. What's up, buddy? You look like someone who has a question. Go for it, man.
Yeah, just piggybacking off of what Sebastian and Scott, my personal prospect heroes, were talking about last, was Montreal has a history of bringing in guys from the training camp that really surprised to make the roster, like Victor Mete a few years ago. Kind of came out of nowhere, and suddenly he's playing with Shea Weber on the first pairing. Cale Fleury was a similar story. Even Jesperi Kotkaniemi wasn't really expected to come into the NHL right away, maybe need another year in Finland to come back. And guys like Dia are a bit older. He's 27, I think. So I'm wondering if there's any younger guys, younger prospects that you could see being that surprise Montreal Canadiens player coming out of training camp.
The guy, okay, I don't think it's likely this season purely because of the logjam on the fourth line. But like, I don't think we could really mention Ryan Poehling here because he's a literal contender for roster spot this season. Like that would be a bit of a cop out here. And I think that guys like Joel Teasdale and Jesse Ylonen need a bit more AHL time. Teasdale because of just recovering from all of his injuries, and Ylonen just to adapt to continue to adapt to North America. The guy I'm looking at is Harvey Pinard. I think like he has that work ethic and that like Gallagher-esque playing style. Like he's not going to be a Gallagher. I mean, chances are he's not going to be a Gallagher ever. Like again, 30 goal scorer, play driving first line winger like Gallagher. You don't find those every day. But I think Harvey Pinard could really be Gallagher light of like that same playing style, but in a depth role. Like he's small, but he's so tenacious, so hardworking. I think he could like see a little bit of NHL action this season.
I'm gonna add on from what you said there about sort of tenacity and hard work, and I'm gonna throw in a guy who has become, in my opinion, the heart and soul of the Rocket. That is Alex Belzile. The Canadiens have sort of developed a short kind of, how would you say, love affair with Belzile and just what he brings to Laval's roster. And after signing a one-year AHL deal with the team and doing what he did in that one AHL season, Montreal's just latched onto this guy's story and ran with it, and it's produced one heck of a feel-good story for the Canadiens. Belzile has been cut and scratched and sent down at every single level he's played at, and in spite of it all, he's worked his absolute butt off to get here, and he's a very talented two-way player with great face-off ability and slight offensive upside at the same time. Montreal gave him a shot at last year's playoffs when they sort of had nothing to lose, and they were in that series against the Philadelphia Flyers. And while he only played 2 games this past season for them, I definitely feel like he's always a shot to make the roster just because of how hard he works and how much he puts into the game.
All right, Scott, Sebastian, thank you very much for that wonderful segment, guys. And now we're going to send it right back to our favorite panelist and insider. I'm sorry, buddy, man. You after the opening segment, I'm sure you have more than a few enemies out there. So now we're going to give you 5 minutes to really, redeem yourself. Give it to us with all your insider news and rumors. And now's the time to wow us again, good buddy. So Elias Laradi with the insider report. What do you got, bud?
So actually, going back to Michael McNiven, all the hearings were released today for the arbitration. His hearing is actually scheduled for August 11th. So August 11th, basically now the Habs have until August 11th to sign him, or he's going to go to arbitration.